Welcome back to the Tavern, everybody. It's Frodan and Brian Kilber here to preview the next match, as well as wrap up some of the thoughts on the series that we just watched, Brian. We had a very good first series of the day, Frozen versus B787. Second match, a little bit quicker, and I think there's a couple of things that we want to hit on. What was the first thing you want to talk about?
I think one thing that really stood out in that match was really the Jade Shaman deck from X-Hope really struggled. He lost the first game against the Reno Mage, which is generally a matchup where the Jade Shaman is considered to be a big favorite, and even lost another before he's finally able to find a win. And previously, Shaman was one of, if not the most popular class, so seeing it really kind of knock down a peg with the Spirit Claws and Buccaneer change.
Of course, another story that we want to talk about is just how strong Europe is looking. We mentioned DrJikininki, we mentioned the next match coming up. It's Neirea from Ukraine up against DrJikininki from America, the winter champion for the Americas region. We're also going to hit Palmblatt versus Lovely Chuk. Brian will be casting that much later. Of course, Animal TJ are teeing up the next match. Let's talk a little bit about the first clash between EU and NA. I think this is something that people always address. It's one of the biggest rivalries within the Western community. They said this was the biggest storyline that they thought from 2016. Going to 2017, do you think there's any difference here?
Well, I think that it's clear that the European representatives in this tournament are bringing with them a lot more experience. They're players who the fans and the community are much more familiar with. This is really a clash not only of North America versus Europe, but also a clash of the old guard versus the new. Neirea is a player who has participated in BlizzCon. He's a player who made his name not even just last year, but years before in the open tournament circuit. Whereas DrJikininki, he was someone who no one knew his name, certainly not how to pronounce his name, before the Americas Championship.
I still have a little bit of trouble. Hopefully it's going to come out right. Let's introduce our players. Our first, hailing from Ukraine, it is Neirea. His opponents, representing the United States of America, please welcome DrJikininki.
It's go time! DrJikininki versus Neirea.
My first match, Neirea.
Against DrJikininki, I have a favorable lineup, so I need just to play my best game to win.
He's obviously well known in the community. He's just a solid player, really consistent with what he does.
Will he play safe or will he play aggressive?
I think I'm well off enough to really compete with him and compete with him at a high level and make sure I'm on top of my game.
I don't really want to make any predictions. That seems wrong.
DrJikininki versus Neirea. Let's go!
The stage is set for the next match. It's DrJikininki versus Neirea. That's admirable. Give me the scoop on these two players.
Yeah, it's the veteran versus the newcomer in this match. Neirea been in the scene for a long time, and as Brian mentioned, a previous world champion competitor. He's played 23 matches in the Hearthstone Championship Tour since 2016. DrJikininki, he's played 10.
10, and they were from the playoffs that we just saw about a month ago. So he's new, but his style isn't pinned down. You heard Neirea mention, will he play aggressive? Will he play a little bit more safe? It's hard to tell at this point because he has such a small sample size of matches to go on. And these guys' deck lists, we just saw them for a brief moment on screen, but anything stand out to you as something to look out for in this match, Admirable?
One of the big things I'm looking at is their approach to the later game stages. Neirea's chosen to go with Jade Druid as sort of his giant build mechanic, where DrJikininki, who I'll just refer to as Dr. J from this point, it's kind of a mouthful to say, he's brought Jade Shaman to the table here, and it's very heavily teched for aggression. 2 copies of Lightning Storm, 2 copies of Maelstrom Portal, 2 copies of Jinyu Water Speaker. That's a lot of stuff dedicated to controlling the early board and stabilizing your life total. Second thing to look at, though, is the Reno Warlock decks, where they're somewhat similar, but Dr. J, he's got Soulfire in his build. He's got the big combo damage. You look at Neirea's list, he's got Soulfire in it. He's got Mind Control tech. Very different approaches to a couple of these lists. They could end up being very key, but as we get into game number 1 here, Rogue versus Warlock, Dr. J going to be on the Rogue. This matchup can get a little bit tricky at times for Neirea.
Yeah, it can. A lot of times the Twisting Nether is the only way you have to deal with a big concealed board. there are a few other things that Dr. J has in his list that might, you know, throw him for a curveball. He's got Shaku in his list, which of course is a 2/3 stealth that gives you a random card from your opponent's class. That can add things into the mix that you weren't accounting for when you looked at the deck list. And, you know, a big thing here is Neirea's experience. He was a runner-up at the 2015 Europe Championship. He made it to the World Championship. So is his experience going to help him keep calm in those situations where he may be behind in a match, where he really doesn't know the way out of a situation? That experience is nothing to scoff at.
It certainly isn't, and we even saw that really take place in our first match, where Frozen, another player who's been a veteran of the scene for a long time, nerves were clearly getting to him. The way that he played in his first couple of games is not reflective of the way he typically does. And I think that experience edge really gives Neirea an edge here. If you just kind of look at the body language of the two, I mean, he just looks calm and focused at home. Neirea, Dr. J looks very focused. He's been a little fidgety. I think as the games continue to progress, if he finds himself in some tough spots, it's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, Dr. J, though, he looked, you know, not by far, but pretty head and shoulders above a lot of the field, a lot of the Americas players that made it to the Winter Championship. And, you know, will that continue to carry over in his matches this week? Will he be able to replicate the success that he had in the Americas playoffs? Only time will tell. But right off the bat, he lets the Doomsayer go off. He did have some options to kill it, but it would have expended a lot of resources. Is it worth using Cold Blood this early on just to kill a Doomsayer, leaving your board vulnerable to, say, Mortal Coil, things like that? So, you know, going in a 2 mana, maybe he could have, but this is sort of where the big stage comes in. Is he feeling comfortable enough to make risks this early on in the tournament?
That's a big thing to point out, because honestly, I really liked the expensive kill on. He could have used the preparation and the Cold Blood in his hand to put 5 power on one of his little guys on board, and then use that dagger up, take care of that Doomsayer. He would have ended with 6 power on board. Something to really think about is hand reading and how these players get signals from one another. Would Neirea have chosen to coin Doomsayer if he had Mortal Coil in hand? That's typically a play that you would see Neirea make in that situation, rather than coin the Doomsayer. And if you look at the texture of Dr. J's hand, it's almost entirely dedicated to dealing damage as quickly as possible. That single turn could have changed the scope of this game. With the way his hand is constructed, I'm curious if damage would have just been the play.
Yeah, and Dr. J, you know, maybe nerves already getting to him. We talked about him the other day about how tough his group is. Go ahead and take a look.
I think the biggest weakness right now is the group I got put in. I think the group is extremely talented. I think the group is extremely strong. And I think if I can get out of this group and then make it to top 8, it may actually be easier for my lineup to do well in top 8 than to do in this group stage.
And frankly, I have to agree with him. I think he's got his work cut out for him in this group, and the lineups, they don't match up poorly against him, but they're not favorable, I don't think.
Well, that's a 10 damage South Sea deckhand that gets killed, and you can tell what Dr. J's plan is with his hand.
And it makes perfect sense.
Draws a counterfeit coin. For him, his plan here is to kill him before Reno Jackson becomes an issue. We're going into turn 4. He never used a coin early on in the game just to be able to take care of that board with the Doomsayer early on. And now he's at 10. Dr. J starting to piece together the damage.
Well, he's not just at 10. He's got the curse from Curse of Rafam in his hand. Neirea has to expend 2 mana or he will take 2 damage a turn from that effect. That effect is not something that you play in your deck right there. That is an effect that Dr. J put into his hand. Every turn it's there, it's 2 more damage. Leroy in hand for Dr. J, that's 6 more. Neirea really wanted to play Kazakus on this turn. It's very important for him to get that potion online. I don't think he's got that liberty right now.
But if he were to play Kazakus this turn, he'd give DrJikininki more outs for lethal the following turn. So he decides not to. Sap picked up. Eviscerate would have been enough damage to end the game. And he actually still has 1 more turn because Reno Jackson is not an issue going into turn 5. He knows the coin has been expended. He's just going to continue to chip away with this dagger. Neirea might have to play Kazakus potion here if he doesn't pick up a taunt, just to try and gain a little bit more armor. What range of damage is Neirea going to play around in this situation?
That's a good question, because if he's not dead from 9, is he ever dead from 8? That's a pretty big no. I'm curious if we're going to see a 5 here or if we're going to see a 1, but either way, he has to find a way to defend himself. Currently, none of these options do that.
Yeah, he goes for a 5, so this is going to be the only card he's going to be able to play this turn is the Kazakus. I can imagine he's looking for armor, looking for ways to stop damage. Summon 2 friendly minions that have died in this game, not the best. He has had a Doomsayer die, so maybe if he wants to sort of block future turns from Dr. J, that's a possibility.
Well, the other thing, too, is if he wants to stay alive, he's got to find a way to get a clock on Dr. J. I'm looking at the 5/5, personally.
I'd say so. Freeze 2 random enemy minions with
There's
conceal.
gain 7. It's going to be gain 7 armor for sure.
So Dr. J's window is starting to close. Let's see if he can pick up some damage. Looks like a Gadgets and Auctioneer.
Ooh. Well, not damage, but certainly a strong draw at this point. With Counterfeit Coin in preparation, these mana effects aren't doing anything for Dr. J right now. Cycle him for some fresh cards, thanks to Auctioneer. Big pickup.
It's a little bit different than what his game plan was at the beginning, but picks up the Conceal.
TJ, that is a huge draw right now. Neirea no longer has a way to interact with Gadgets and Auctioneer.
Yeah, he was not even given Mystic Wool, I don't think, from the
Oh, he took freeze to enemy minions, so he can't actually stop the damage from it.
He stopped the damage, but can't stop the draw. So that's going to give Dr. J multiple options to try and pick up more burn spells. But the armor from Neirea is going to help him stay alive for a little bit longer. And he's starting to peel on some damage, but Neirea needs Reno ASAP.
Just needs anything to defend himself. 15 is fairly comfortable. But the problem now is that there's a questing adventurer. So this is a 2-pronged attack from Dr. J at this point. And that's another questing adventurer. Is this where he's going to go? He's going to wait.
I like waiting. Picks up another Conceal.
Oh my gosh.
I think you just throw the second questing adventure into the mix.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? I know you're looking to end the game the following turn, so why not throw that little bit of extra damage out there? It's also just another card that buffs up his buddy over there.
Yeah, no backstab targets readily available unless he wants to damage his own minions. With Sap, with Leroy, with backstab, I don't think there's a card in Neirea's deck that gets him out of this other than Rito Jackson.
Can't even tap for it. He's only at 7 minutes. And look at Dr. J. You can see him look off to the top left of the camera there. He's actually looking at Neirea. He's staring him down during his turns, trying to get every inch of reaction out of him. Every piece of information that he can get is going to help him move on in this.
Valiant effort from Neirea here, but it's no good. Leroy is going to lock up game 1.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a great job by Dr. J playing his hand to its fullest. Didn't wait.
Smile.
Little smirk. Little smirk.
I mean, that's the perfect one to take. I mean, game number 1, this is the breather for Dr. J. I mean, imagine the difference between losing and winning game 1. You're like, I knew it. Things weren't going to go well today. Can't get in that mindset. Now, that's alleviated. Feeling good.
Yeah, first match on stage. Even though playoffs is a pretty big stage, it's not as big. There's no live crowd. You're not playing for this big of stakes. You're not playing for a spot at the World Championship. You're not playing for that big of a prize pool. So getting that first win sort of out of the way, out of your system, I would smirk too.
Rightfully so. I mean, especially with the hand that he had, just all aggression, and he found a way to even slow it down a little bit. And sure, he got the cold blood damage. Great job. Game 1.
We've been talking about Dr. J. He is a newcomer, but let's get to know him a little bit. We had a chance to sit down and talk with him, so go ahead and take a look.
DrJikininki. That is definitely a handful for a lot of players. The battle tag came from my father and I. We used to play some games together, and we wanted to come up with a really cool name because, I was 13 or 14 at the time. You gotta have a cool name. You can't be not cool. So we went and searched up mythological creatures. We saw all these names, and a lot of them were from like Greek mythology. And we then came across the word Jikininki. And I saw that word and instantly was like, that's the word. My dad agreed with me, and we then found out what it meant. It's a mythological creature in Japanese Buddhism that refers to a soul who is greedy, impulsive, selfish. And they are basically lost in the world after they pass away, and they're left to roam the earth eating humans, which is kind of crazy because I don't want to come off that way or feel that way about myself. Now the truth is out. Now you don't have to go search out what a Jikininki is.
Admirable, you can't just be not cool.
Unless you're me. In which case, then you can totally be not cool.
Yeah, it's a good thing he didn't start gaming with his mom instead of his dad. He might have been Dr. Unicorn.
I can see the connection. It would just make sense if you don't think about it.
Yeah, but the intensity from DrJikininki is there. I mean, you can watch him stare down Neirea on every single one of these turns, just trying to gauge a reaction. And these players are close. It's not like the past championships where they had quite a bit of distance in them. They're like 6 feet away from each other.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you can see the whites of their eyes looking across at him. So this is getting pretty intense. But moving into game number 2, Shaman for Dr. J. Neirea is going to bring out the Freeze Mage.
Yeah, and this is one of the bread and butter matchups, I'd say, for Neirea. Certainly one of the more favorable ones that he can get. Big things to look at here for Dr. J. His deck is not quite as aggressive as the Shaman decks have been in recent memory. They've slowed down quite a bit. This deck tops out at Jade Chieftain with Thing from Below and Eye of Blackpaw right under it. And it's mostly trying to control the board, and Dr. J has teched it very much towards that direction. 2 copies of Maelstrom Portal, 2 copies of Lightning Storm, 2 copies of Jinyu Water Speaker. These are fairly slow cards versus Freeze Mage, albeit Jinyu Water Speaker servicing a good point. Dr. J has to apply a lot of pressure on Neirea, and that's exactly what Freeze Mage is trying to stop. It's got Doomsayer, it's got Frost Novas, it's got Blizzards. Everything it does is just trying to offset an early aggro plan and then deliver huge combo damage at the end of the game. Now, in this opening hand here, Dr. J's got 2 copies of Totem Golem. That could be a big factor in this one, but it looks like Neirea's even got the tools to handle this.
He does. He's got Doomsayer in his opening hand, which is a great tool, but, you know, you talked about Dr. J's list. It's a very consistent list. It doesn't really have many crazy things. A lot of 2-ups. That consistency is there, but a lot of players didn't like Shaman that much. If you look at sort of Jade and mid-range Shaman together, in the past we would have saw 16 out of 16 players bring it. But across the mid-range variations, only 9 out of 16 brought it. It's starting to become less and less popular. I mean, did these players have a reason for not bringing it? Did they see a weakness in the deck? As we go across the weekend, we'll start to see trends from Shaman, whether or not it was a good choice to bring it. But Neirea with Freeze Mage, it is said to have a pretty good matchup. Even though there's 2 Jinyu Water Speakers for Dr. J in this deck, with Evolved Kobold, you can set up a 1-turn kill as long as you have the time for it. So the key for Dr. J here is pressure, pressure, pressure.
Yeah, you mentioned too how Shaman has kind of fallen by the wayside in terms of popularity, and that's largely in part to the changes to Small Time Buccaneer and to Spirit Claws. Small Time Buccaneer moving down to 1 health, Spirit Claws moving up to 2 mana. Freeze Mage has been on the rise. However, this deck was thought to be a little bit dead in the metagame. 5 out of the 16 players this weekend have brought Freeze Mage with them. Very different contrast.
Especially to what we saw, you know, just about a month ago in the playoffs, maybe a bit more. But this Acolyte of Pain is going to do some work. He's going to be able to get multiple draws off of it. DrJikininki, a lot of times you can even just afford to hex an Acolyte of Pain that's played on the board.
Yeah, doesn't have one available to him, but it's certainly a reasonable play. Neirea drawing too many cards is going to put you in a spot where it's not working very well.
I just want to say, Dr. J looks pretty comfortable up there on stage.
It's really focused.
Yeah, hyper-focused. That's a good thing. That's a really good thing. Especially for a young player, and I say young as sort of, you know, his age within the scene, not his age in general. But trying to put himself on the map, also trying to put Americas on the map. You know, Europe has been said to be the strongest region by a lot of players. Even a lot of, you know, pro players from the Americas say that Europe's better.
That's right.
DrJikininki is coming in here representing the Americas playoff champ, so we'll see if he can get it done for his region.
Interesting choice here from Neirea. Chooses to expend Fireball over Frostbolt and Hero Power. And while it's certainly a big overkill, Neirea is really thinking about his future turns. How does he set himself up in a spot where he can actually use his spells more flexibly? All those burn spells that are meant for combo damage can double as removal. And in this spot, he's favoring flexibility over more damage.
Yeah, I really like that. You know, a lot of times when you play Evolved Kobold later, unless you get the juiciest Emperor of Thorsan alive, the Frostbolt you're going to be able to fit in much easier than the Fireball in the later stages of the game. A lot of times Fireball is used to set up or even threaten that lethal, force them to use their healing maybe before they want to in order to set things up. So that Frostbolt is definitely going to have a lot more flexibility as time goes on. And while Dr. J will most likely get a second draw from this Mana Tide Totem. I don't know if it's worth expending a Hex on if he's not developing a board behind it.
Yeah,
But he is going to go with the Totem Golem.
I think protecting the Mana Tide here is very strong from Dr. J. From his perspective, Neirea doesn't have a direct way to kill it, so there's a chance it just keeps drawing for a long time. And then when he gets to add the Totem Golem alongside it, Neirea now has to make a big decision. Is he going to race for card draw and try to find big swing turns and big combo damage, or is he going to expend more burn and take care of this Mana Tide Totem? One Fireball's already been used. If he uses another Frostbolt, it means there's one of those left. You generally cannot use the second Frostbolt unless you're delivering lethal damage.
Freeze Mage just nowadays, at least the standard list, don't have infinite damage. A lot of times in the past, they would run Archmage Tinnitus, and they could get that reduced. They could slap it on the board and get a bunch of fireballs. But now, the burn they have in their deck is the burn that they have for the game. So if you use too much damage early on, you may not be able to get through a Brand plus a Jinyu Water Speaker, or even just 2 Jinyu Water Speakers. Those cards can add up to a lot of healing, especially if you're not planning around it early on in the game, like around these stages for Neirea. So he's just going to leave it up, try to ping it down, and play his own game. He's going to draw his own cards. I mean, if he draws enough, he'll be able to kill Dr. J no matter how many cards he's drawn.
That's a very good point, too. And Neirea is an excellent combo player. It's the style that he likes more than, I'd say, just about anything else, is to oftentimes play kind of wonky decks and try to get the job done there. He's very experienced with this deck. And when he's choosing to race for cards here, you know, frankly, I'm curious who's got the advantage in a spot like this, because if Dr. J can find his critical cards, has like a Brand Jinyu Water Speaker turn to get that double heal effect, that can really offset the burn plan that Neirea's on here. And so choosing to use this Lightning Storm, this card that's fairly dead in this matchup, just trying to get pressure rolling, and he's taking this opportunity to get a second Mana Tide Totem in play. So he is looking for his healing cards in this matchup, wants to make sure that burn is going to be a lot tougher for Neirea to pull off.
Now, drawing cards is great, but I said at the beginning of the match, it's about the pressure. It doesn't matter how many cards you have in your hand if you can't play them in time before you die. Even through Jinyu Water Speakers, if you give the mage enough time, he will assemble enough cards to go for the one-turn kill. With Evolved Kobold, it's not that difficult when you've drawn this many cards. And there you can see Dr. J's run through the America's Winter Playoffs, defeating a lot of very strong players, including VLPS, Zalay, and Amnesiac, who Amnesiac's touted as being one of the best players in Americas, if not the entire world.
Second Fireball expended for Neirea. And Dr. J is drawing lots of cards. There's really no shortage of pressure on Dr. J's side, and that's a key one right there. Jinyu Water Speaker will heal him for 6 when Neirea is going for those burst turns. But like you mentioned, looks like Neirea may be going on a single turn kill plan here. Now, Alex Straza, I'm certain, is slated for the near future if he's at all safe in that board position. Afterwards, though, when he sees the Jinyu Water Speaker, he's going to need some extra burn to get that job done.
Playing Alex Straza a lot of times when you understand that your win condition is a one-turn kill is just to get a card out of your hand. You know that it's probably going to be dealt with. You know that your opponent's probably going to heal unless you have a strong read that they don't have those cards. But Dr. J's drawn a lot. So Alex Straza is probably going to be used in that situation as just a card to get out of his hand to make more room for burn. It's incredible how that works, but Frost Nova picked up. He's got a lot of time. He's got a lot of stall tools, but he still needs a couple of key cards.
The stall tools, I think, are what's going to be a big difference here. Neirea's got Acolyte of Pain and Arcane Intellect in his hand alongside 2 Frost Novas and a Blizzard. That is a lot of extra time that he can buy. Dr. J has very little damage from hand in the deck. It usually requires board presence to get the job done. Frostbolt finally going to get used, and so Neirea clearly on the plan to draw probably his entire deck with the way that he's playing this game. He's saying, Dr. J, draw as many cards as you want. I don't think there's any way you can actually kill me.
Yeah, you do have to sort of count damage. I know Neirea is a very player that relies on instinct a lot. He's played so many games, and we actually talked to him, and he said, you know, he doesn't even value tons of hours of practice. He plays a couple hours a day, jams some games, but a lot of times he just relies on that experience and the fact that he's played these decks so many times across the years to get him through matches. So sometimes he doesn't go for those little details, but Ice Block picked up. That's going to be a great tool for him. It buys him at least an additional turn at the very least, and he knows there's no Bloodlust in the list of Dr. J, so he can count the maximum amount of damage that Dr. J can deal.
And that's exactly why he played Ice Barrier over the Frost Nova here, is the lack of that Bloodlust. Ice Block was the key card for Neirea, because if he's going to play an Alex Straza, it's going to require him to be totally safe for an entire turn. Now that he's got that in play, and a second Ice Block to back that up, it is quite literally a matter of him drawing extra cards at this point. If he finds Emperor in the next 1 or 2 draws, this is going to be really tough for Dr. J to win, and it's already going to be fairly tough. Even if you look at the board state, you go, he's got all the minions in play, he's got a million cards in hand. It's the fact that he can't actually kill Neirea in the next couple turns.
Especially since his board is just full. He may get into a situation where he can't even play enough cards to avoid overdrawing. He's going to play Aya here with no benefit from the battle cry. Or at least he's thinking about it.
That's a tough spot. I don't know what I would do here. I really don't. And that's a big key you mentioned too. If his board's filled, he can't actually get a heal from Jinyu Water Speaker.
And Neirea knows that. He may, even if Blizzard may seem like a better choice in a certain situation, he might Frost Nova just to prevent Dr. J from getting more stuff on the board. He's
Wow.
Shade Lightning his own Mana Tide.
I mean, this is the consideration he's had. He wants Aya Blackfall on the board so that the Death's Rattle will provide a minion in the face of AoE damage clearing the board. And second Jade Lightning picked up, but now that's 10 cards in hand for Dr. J. His next draw will be burned. And with 7 minions in play, Neirea has so much control over this situation.
Still has very little burn in his hand, but he only has 6 cards left remaining in his deck.
And Dr. J's only got 7. The 2 Mana Tides actually can become a liability at some point. If Neirea just needs a couple extra points of damage, Dr. J's quickly drawing towards that fatigue hit.
So he's going to keep drawing, not really too much downside to it. Once you reach your entire deck, as long as you're not under too much pressure,
he's got to consider what
you'll
the
have time
burns
to play
look like,
everything.
too. I mean, if he's playing Acolyte using Hero Power, 5 mana left over, and 10 cards in hand. Oh, that's a big one. And he's got another Frost Nova for that as well. Neirea's, he's got this game so in his favor at this point.
Now, one thing to note, though, is Neirea, if Dr. J attacks into this Acolyte Opinion, he'll go to 9 cards. The following turn, he'll actually discard.
Yeah.
Which, if he discards, he has a
Second Frostbolt.
Second Frostbolt. That means all of a sudden that first Ice Lance sort of gets stranded. Actually, it just straight up gets stranded. I mean, it can help its old buddy there, the second Ice Lance.
I mean, he just shook his head, too. I wonder if he just
knows.
realized that.
Yeah, that's...
Like, hang on, wait, is that the way I lose? And if that's the case, is that something Dr. J's thinking about? Does Dr. J think that the way he wins right now is by overdrawing Neirea? He's going to clean up his own Mana Tides so that he stops overdrawing.
And he's going to attack into the Acolyte play. He spots it. Neirea's deck right now, the 3 cards, I believe are all burn spells. And a Blizzard.
Uh-oh.
There's Frostbolt.
Oh, my.
And Dr. J looks over at Neirea's reaction and gives him a little smile.
Well, now this is really tricky. That's a lot of damage Neirea just lost.
That's a pretty big oversight. I don't even know if Neirea thought that. It took him a while before we saw the reaction of him shaking his head, realizing that he was going to burn a card.
Oh, he does not feel okay about this. And frankly, I wouldn't either. He just lost. In combination with the Kobold, he just lost 11 points of damage.
And Emperor hit Forgotten Torch, but it did not hit either of the Roaring Torches. So his maximum damage is severely reduced.
Yeah, he's gonna put the torches in the deck now and look for a single turn kill threat from hand. So with Kobold, if he had 2 Roaring Torches, that'd be 12 damage there, 4 more from Ice Lance, that'd be 16, and then 6 more from the total number of spells that are dealing damage with Kobold. So he is actually threatening lethal to some degree in this spot. He's hoping that he can either wait and draw those burn spells and kill Dr. J in 1 turn, or if he sees Jinyu Water Speaker, land an Alex Straza. So this is also a really nice setup here for Neirea, who, with so few cards in his deck, is very likely to draw those burn spells.
He does have time. That's the one thing that he does have going on his side here.
Just a pass. And this is exactly what Neirea was accounting for as well. If he drew Doomsayer, that means he's got Blizzard Doomsayer to potentially buy himself even more time.
Seen both hexes.
That's all the freezes, though. There's no more freeze effects in Neirea's Mage deck. And there's no Flame Strike in here as well. So that's all the AoE gone at this point.
And he knows that Dr. J, the maximum amount of heal that he can get for the rest of the game is 12 from both Jin Water Speaker since he killed the brand earlier on in the game. I mean, I guess if you look at it that way, the Frostbolt that he had to expend to use that, he may have made up a little bit of that damage by reducing the amount that Jin could heal.
And Dr. J looks like he's going to go for a kill on this Doomsayer here. If he's playing Tunnel Trog, that means he's pushing damage into this Doomsayer here. So he's got to kill on it no matter what, regardless of what this Lightning Storm rolls.
And you mentioned it, he's starting to run out of turns here just a little bit. Dr. J, he can count the maximum amount of damage that Neirea can do in those 2 turns. He knows that both Forgotten Torches came out post-Emperor, which means that the Roaring Torches won't be reduced. So he knows that the Evolved Kobold can deal that 20 damage, but nothing more.
And Neirea's counting right now, how much damage has Dr. J used? If I play this Ice Barrier, can my Ice Block get popped? This is a super important turn for Neirea, where he's like, wait a minute, he's used 2 Jade Lightnings, he's used a Lightning Bolt. Does this Ice Barrier keep me safe from my Ice Block getting popped? If the answer is yes, gotta do it. And that's why the hero power is hitting the thing from below here too. No opportunities for lethal from that single hero power hitting Dr. J. Just go ahead and wait. And now the fatigue is getting close for Dr. J as well.
This one's gonna come down to the wire, Admirable.
I think Neirea's got it locked. If you look at the way the damage is panning out, the Ice Block's not getting popped this turn, which means it gets popped on the following turn. Dr. J would have to pop him at 1 and have a fatigue hit nail him.
Which is a possibility. Is that something that you're accounting for now?
Well, depending on what he didn't attack with the Trog, so
well, he's attacking now. But you sort of have to plan for it. Neirea's almost out of cards, and his last 2 cards are both Roaring Torches. So the maximum amount of damage he can deal in a single turn
is 22.
22.
If he plays Alexstrasza, Dr. J can use his minions to just sacrifice into Alexstrasza to make space so he can use the Jin Water Speakers. Neirea knows every card is going to be available to Dr. J next turn, minus what he's already used. Dr. J knows the same about Neirea. This is solvable from this spot, but rather than spend all my brain energy to do that, I'm just going to watch him do it. Neirea's last card being the other Roaring Torch was really brutal.
He does have potential lethal next turn should Dr. J not heal. And he's trying to think through every possibility here.
I don't think he can get there. He just doesn't have the damage to close.
Yeah, he's going to ping face.
He's going to hope that Dr. J does not realize how much damage he can deal.
He can heal back up to 26, and then he's only going to take 1 point of fatigue, plus the 22 damage is going to come, so he'll be left at 3 health.
Well, he can only gain 6 from here, but that's more than enough at this point.
Yeah.
22 damage, I believe, is Neirea's reach.
And next turn, he can even... He holds on to the Lightning Bolt here. He can Lightning Bolt one of his own minions to make room for a Jin Water Speaker should Neirea not play a minion.
Well, Neirea's going to tick into fatigue. If he doesn't heal himself, he's just dead. He's got to kill Dr. J this following turn.
Yeah.
So he's just going to heal now. He's going to be like, I don't know if he can get me a 30, but if I forgot something, I want insurance.
Yeah.
Dr. J has got game 2 locked up.
And there's the second Roaring Torch, and Neirea knows. You can see the look on his face. He's going to go ahead and ping himself off, and Dr. J takes a 2-0 lead. You can see he's feeling it, man. He is feeling it.
I mean, that was really well played. The Mana Tides gave Dr. J so much gas to work with that it was a matter of just finding the ways the tools worked together. quite literally had nothing to do with efficiency towards the end and just simply about not dying. Once he saw the Frostbolt, that was a critical burn. It crushed the amount of damage that Neirea had in one turn, and that made him effectively unable to close that game at any point.
Yeah, so a slight oversight by Neirea, and, you know, did that cost him the game? You know, he played the Acolyte of Pain, pinged it, realized through Dr. J's turn that maybe it was a mistake. We actually have that turn, so we can go ahead and bring it up here. So he plays the Acolyte of Pain, pings it off, goes to 9 cards. Maybe he just didn't realize that there was a Jade Claws up, because that on board is a way for Neirea to lose a card with 5 cards only left in his deck. One of those being a Frostbolt that's almost necessary for his win condition.
His facial expression leads me to believe that he didn't account for it, but I think it's worth taking a risk to a certain degree. I mean, the Frostbolt's the only draw in his deck that he really gets punished on with the burn. So if he draws it in the opposite order, he's almost got the game locked. If the Frostbolt is any of the cards other than that next draw, he's got it locked. And if that's the case, that means that's just a high percentage play. He does need to continue to get towards the end of his deck, and it just happened to punish him that time. It was looked like about 5-1.
I understand, you know, that's towards the beginning of a game when you have like 15 cards left and the odds are very low. But when you have 5 cards left, you sort of know that that's going to happen to come out to punish you. But at the end of that clip, you saw Dr. J throw the deuces up in the air. 2 down, 2 to go for him as we get ready for game number 3. Can Dr. J keep this streak up? He's going to be playing the Dragon Priest up against Neirea's Rogue.
And this matchup to me is really cool because it's so much different than I originally thought it was, where I always thought Dragon Priest just kind of got stomped by this deck. There was just so many tools to work with that they could blow you out of the water on tempo, they could take a really strong early lead, and you had no real recovery mechanics. But if you look at Dr. J's Dragon build, he's got a copy of Dragonfire Potion in here, which is an incredibly important tool when you're facing down the mid-game giant threats. And I'm thinking specifically Stealthed Auctioneer. That's one he's unable to interact with. But the second thing is he's got Defender of Argus. And Defender of Argus can certainly deliver a little bit more damage than you maybe were accounting for, and at the same time set up a stronger board state than you're accounting for in Neirea's position. So this matchup really boils down to how much pressure Dr. J can get on Neirea and whether or not he can have a significant swing in the face of one of those giant push turns that Neirea can have.
Dr. J also has in his deck 2 Blackwing Technicians, which is not a choice that we see made too often. Sometimes a one of. Sometimes people exclude it from their deck if they want, you know, say a little bit more AoE, couple bookworms, things like that. But just being able to curve out can also be good against Rogue. You know, punish Rogue for having awkward hands. Punish them for putting a coin in their deck and drawing it in an awkward spot.
That's a big facet of Rogue, actually, is a lot more of it boils down to how they draw their own cards rather than what you actually do to them. And that's just because that's the nature of a combo deck. When it draws all the right cards, it'll succeed a lot. When it doesn't, it kind of just looks like a pile of weird, uninteractive cards. But they meant to function on a specific purpose where it's much more percentage play than just about anything else.
Yeah, but it's up to you as the opponent to sort of recognize when your opponent has a weak hand and make their turns even tougher because of it. You know, you might find that if you go for value when you realize that your opponent has a weak hand, it can feel good because they're not building a board, so I have an excuse to go for value. But sometimes it's just better to go for pressure. If they have an awkward hand, punish them for it.
Yeah. Can't draw any more cards if you're dead.
Amen to that, brother.
Thank you.
And Neirea's hands, it's not very dead. It's not very weak. It's just a lot of good minions. I think it's one of the things Dr. J can struggle with, is just a lot of strong minions.
He can, yeah. Dr. J can definitely struggle with that. Dragon Priest does, you know, have a very few answers to those things sometimes, so they can't pick up that Shadow or Death. But, you know, we've talked time and time again, Dr. J coming in as the newcomer. Sometimes that's an advantage because people may underestimate you. Go ahead and take a look at what he had to say.
People may underestimate me, or they may throw me aside. They may not give me the validation I feel or other players may feel I deserve. And I think that's just an advantage for me.
I have to agree. I think when your opponents underestimate you, they read your hand wrong. They look into your plays differently. it's a big deal to show someone respect and know what a play means from someone you understand versus someone you've never played before.
Dr. J said earlier that his group was incredibly tough, and maybe the other players thought so too. They might have overlooked DrJikininki as a player that they needed to prep too much for. And, you know, advantage being the underdog. And also, if they start to respect you, maybe they start to play worse because of it. You know, there's a lot of advantages coming into a series like this when people don't really know too much about you and they have such a small sample size. And Dr. J is building up a board.
That Conceal is a really interesting draw right now. I'm curious if Neirea is going to try to use this and force some AoE from Dr. J right now. It's like a threat check for it, or if he's going to wait and try to couple it with the Auctioneer. Dr. J's got Dragonfire Potion, so if Neirea waits, Dr. J potentially has a punish for it. If he uses it now, Dr. J may have to fire that off. Then Auctioneer is open. But how much is left on board after that? These are some tough turns that these two are running into, and that's the nature that you get into with Rogue, is your decisions, albeit they tend to go to the same direction, which is finding a big combo turn. It's a tough road to get there. A lot of twists and turns along the way.
A lot of planning ahead as well. What cards do you feel like you can play around? And another Cabal Talon Priest picked up, so Dr. J can keep fighting for the board. But how long can that go on? You know, the more time you give Rogue, the more chances they have to draw into all that stuff. The guys and Auctioneers, the Conceals, the big questings, the Edwin. Those are things that right now Dr. J doesn't have a great answer for. You mentioned the Dragonfire Potion, but that's not all-encompassing. Azure Drake doesn't get hit by that because it's a dragon. All of a sudden, a 6/6 questing adventure doesn't get hit. The 8/8 Van Cleef that's concealed doesn't get hit.
You know, I noticed at the start of this game, Neirea was playing pretty quickly, and Dr. J started to match that pace. This turn, he reached for that Cabal Talon Priest right away, and while I'm pretty sure it's still the right thing to do, he slowed himself down. I'm curious if he caught himself playing too fast in that situation. You know what, let me just slow down and think about it. There's no reason not to. I've got 70 seconds to take the turn. Just find the best solution.
He is trading a whole heck of a lot.
It really is. And that worries me a bit because Dr. J's deck just doesn't have a lot of reach in it. It's very reactive. It's a lot of strong tempo plays. Plays a value-oriented game. Every single time that he invests into Neirea's minions, that gives Neirea more time. He's fine with his minions being removal resources. Neirea has no way to protect his life total, so he's not okay with taking too much damage there.
He also traded off his only dragon, so now even though he's pushing damage, this Dragonfire Potion is going to clear off his own board as well.
And this is the turn that Dr. J was not hoping for. It's a Dragonfire Potion, but he's got none of his own dragons out. So it's a full clear. And Neirea is holding an extra Gadget and Auctioneer. I think this game is lights out for Dr. J here.
Is there any way you can wait? Wait one more turn. Potentially heal up your Cabal Talon Priest. Try and get it. Try and get a little bit more out of these minions before you go for it. He's going to go for it. He's willing to give Neirea a bunch of cards and potentially some huge minions. And that's a risk. That's a genuine risk.
He needs to take a risk too right now. His hand is just not interacting with Neirea's deck at all. There's no more pressure to be added. He has to hope that Neirea overinvests into the board and doesn't have a strong follow-up. Here, though, he's got Questing Adventurer, and that's a second one and a second Conceal. So
yeah,
you're likely to see this get a little bit out of hand, but I'm actually not sure Neirea can play the second Questing Adventurer if he wants the first one to live through a Dragonfire Potion.
He saw Dr. J think pretty heavily going into that, just heal the Cabal Talon Priest and pass. Can he put him on having a Dragonfire Potion? When he float 5 mana, yeah, probably. He's got some awkward cards in his hand. So I don't know if playing into this is going to be the right call. He really needs to start expending some of these resources.
These Auctioneer turns take a long time. If he chains together a bunch of free spells, plus the animations from the Questing Adventure, Neirea taking a lot of time here. This could have hurt him a bit. No time to react from the Swashbuckler. he's going to have to compromise his play just a little bit here.
But he gets out the conceal, and that protects almost his entire board, or at least the cards that matter from that Dragonfire potion. This does, however, give DrJikininki an out. Brand Blackwing Corruptor.
Oh, you're right.
It would be turn 8, and he saw an awkward turn last turn, plus hits to the face. Well, I mean, hits had to come to the face because of the conceal board. But Neirea must have had a strong read that the hand was pretty much entirely situational cards. And Brand plus Blackwing Corruptor, not necessarily situational cards. If you can make the read that Blackwing Corruptor would have come down the previous turn, then maybe
which it definitely would have.
Probably. Now, there was a concealed board, and DrJikininki could have had a plan all along to go with that. But
that would be a very sophisticated play.
Yeah. But, I mean, to be honest, Neirea didn't really have a way to deal with it anyway. And this Dragonfire potion not really doing that much, to be honest.
I mean, is this the difference between all the trade damage that was put there? You know, the combat state obviously ends very different, but the fact that Dr. J played this so control-heavy in the middle, that's not his role in this matchup, and now I think he's just dead.
So there's 14, and each card adds 2. So South Sea Deckhand would be 4 for 18. Eviscerate would be 6 for 24. Shadowward Pain is 26. I don't think he can get there.
Yeah, but can he actually win after this? Can Dr. J actually win with this board state?
Yeah.
That's currently here.
No. He doesn't even have a second Dragonfire potion to be able to defend against it.
Those questing adventures just did a lot of leveling up because they're hitting really hard.
Yeah, he was 2 damage off lethal that turn, I believe, if I counted correctly. But that's going to be Dr. J tapping out. The Rogue strikes, and Neirea finally puts a point on the board for himself with that Rogue deck.
Not a fantastic matchup there for Dr. J. And the middle of the stage, the middle of game stage there is the one to really look at. Should all those trades have been made? Was that necessary to buy some more damage later on? I mean, that's usually the time you typically trade is when you're A, under big threat, or B, it buys you more long-term damage by picking up very favorable trades for you. So if one of those things wasn't the case, then they shouldn't have been trading in that spot. So you'd have to go sit down and analyze it, but that's the one thing I would have in question.
Yeah, so Neirea faced that a lot of people who have been following the competitive scene may recognize, but some of you may be seeing it for the first time. So let's go ahead and meet Neirea.
Well met.
Hey, I'm Neirea. I'm from Poltava, Ukraine, and I'm 24 years old. I play Hearthstone 2 hours a day. When I'm not playing Hearthstone, I'm usually watching streams. I think it's better for me than usually playing. The best thing about playing HCT is meeting cool people.
Just drops a frisbee. Oh, man.
NA catch.
NA catch. EU throw, some would say. But Neirea is definitely an experienced player, but he's down in a series. I mean, how many times has he been down in a series in his career? Probably hundreds of times at this point. He's played so many competitive matches that he is no stranger to this situation. If we look back to the 2015 Europe Championship, he played in front of a crowd of like thousands of people. At the Hearthstone World Championship, he played in front of a crowd of thousands of people. So he's no stranger to that type of pressure, and he's just a pretty calm dude. When we talked to him, he said he doesn't really feel too much pressure. He's pretty relaxed. He's just going to trust his instincts, trust his experience, and go into the match with a pretty clear mindset. He did make, you know, what we called a pretty serious error in his freeze mage match. But you just got to shake those things off, move on. He's got to win now. He's got a point on the board. So now he's just got to work on getting 3 more.
Yeah, and this matchup is certainly a good place to start. Reno Warlock for Neirea, thought to be one of the worst matchups for Dragon Priest. Although lately we've been seeing it go a little bit differently in a couple of tournaments. The way that Dragon Priest has to approach this matchup is basically reckless aggression. They have to get on the board, they have to ignore a lot of potential counterplay and deliver damage. The one big threat they have is that their minions are not easily cleared by AoE effects. For the most part, they're pretty tough to that. They're very health-effective minions. If it gets to the mid or late stage and Neirea is at all safe, his super powerful direct removal spells, like Blast Crystal Potion they just drew, are just going to eliminate minions directly. It doesn't care how much health they have. Once that point hits, Neirea has drawn so many extra cards that he's just simply outvalued Dr. J. There's no resources left for him to really win the game at that point.
Neirea Reno Lock is one of his favorite decks. Probably pretty comfortable. And we had a chance to talk with Neirea about his mindset going into big tournaments like this. Go ahead and take a look.
I think going to every event makes you less nervous going into the other one. So after being in like 10 plus tournaments helped me a lot in just going to with right mindset into a tournament.
It's a good way to look at it.
Being
more experiences, more power.
Yeah, being comfortable is something that a lot of players who watch from home don't really, you know, get to experience on a big stage like this. It's much different playing from the comfort of your own home, you know, petting your dog, watching streams, being relaxed, than playing with this. They have those big headsets on, pumping white noise in with game noises. It's just you and your thoughts. That's it.
Lights are everywhere. People are telling you when you can and can't play. Like, wait for the game for a moment. You've been thinking about it the whole time. You're not sleeping in your own bed. You've been talking with all the other players. You're thinking about how the matchup's going. Maybe your practice didn't go right. Bunch different. This was the one situation where Dr. J needed to deviate as well, was in the face of Neirea playing Brand. The Brand was designed to do exactly something like this, set up a clear. Now that Dr. J has lost that early pressure, this is an opportunity for Neirea to really snowball that situation.
He's just going to continue loading up that board. Reckless aggression is the term you used earlier. I love that term. And it may not fit every situation. Sometimes you have to realize when it's time to, you know, reel back and start playing for value if your early board's not going to be enough.
But the options on Kazaka is pretty weak here.
Ooh, with a Mystic Wool.
TJ just loves Mystic Wool.
Ooh,
with
the Mystic Wool.
4 damage to all minions is what Neirea was looking for in that spot.
He's going to be able to get it. Dr. J has probably played against potentially thousands of Kazakai over the past couple of months.
Not strong discovers for Dr. J here. It's just minions. Just more stats to add on top of that.
You know, even though Reno is probably not going to be activated for a long time, it is just a pretty strong minion at 4/6. It dodges a lot. Now, M-King Boss also dodges a lot. And it's, you know, can be awkward to remove. It's really great coupled with Defender Vargas. But actually, Defender Vargas is gone now. So I might have even just liked the Reno and just play it as a 4/6. Yeah, even without the effect.
I think he's looking at his next turn here where he'd rather have Imp-King Boss and Talon Priest down than simply have a Reno Jackson down. And also, if he discovers and plays Reno Jackson, that means that Dr. J then 100% knows Neirea doesn't have it. Would that change the way that Dr. J plays the game? Can Neirea then slow it down and stop paying as much heed to the pressure if Dr. J wants to go value-oriented, or does that mean he needs to expend more resources and play more aggressively to clear the board because Dr. J knows he doesn't have Reno? I mean, that's a very small thing to look at, but that can certainly crop into your mind.
One of the many reasons why Draconid Operative is such a fantastic card. You get card economy, you get information advantage, and it's also a dragon, so just it being in your hand becomes beneficial to the rest of your deck as well. Blast Crystal Potion used. It's still relatively early in the game. A lot of times Blast Crystal Potion, once you get to 10 mana, just becomes 4 mana hard removal. But now it's going to set him behind. His turns are going to be a little bit tougher until he gets to that max mana point. And Dr. J is going to be able to play a mana ahead.
He's trying to make his board just as strong as possible.
Love it.
To 3 and 4 damage effects. And that's just going to keep that tiny bit of pressure on Neirea. At this point, there's just not much going for Dr. J, so he has to just take his chip damage where he can get it. The fact that he kept that whelp alive means he gets just that little bit more damage, but I fear for him that Neirea may have turned the corner. His hand is looking some good as we go into the late stage.
Holy Nova, not too great when you're playing it on a board that you're sort of behind. His hand just really isn't that amazing.
This is one of the ways that it snowballs too, is that Dr. J's Dragon Priest deck is designed to take advantage of the board state. If your opponent is simply trying to answer the board state and draw lots of cards, your minions lose a lot of value in those spots. They're meant to take other minions and keep on going afterwards. There's so few opportunities for that to happen that he just ends up with a hand of situational cards.
And Neirea's plenty healthy. I mean, at 17, Dragon Priest's range is tiny. And he's seen the card that Dr. J picked up from the Dragonid operative. So he's confident that he can even just keep tapping.
I think so. I mean, he does want to find Reno Jackson at this point. Something interesting to note is that Neirea just hasn't played Mountain Giant, and one of the big fears of that is just Shadow Word Death from Dr. J. If he plays that Mountain Giant and it gets taken care of straight away, that's a lot of tempo loss and a very valuable card that you gave up. So for all things considered, he's just simply trying to fight for the board very effectively until he can land a better Mountain Giant turn.
And Dr. J here, as soon as that Shadow Word Death was picked up in his hand, he instantly picked it up and threw it at the Abyssal Enforcer. That's a huge tell to Neirea that there wasn't a Shadow Word Death in the hand in the first place, and that's why he automatically just slams Mountain Giant here, because he knows that it's pretty much always going to stick around.
And with Faceless Shambler and Faceless Manipulator, he can copy it a lot. Dr. J is drawing for his second Shadow Word Death. That's not it, and Neirea is going to lock this game up. Although it may take another couple turns for it to end. He's about to have 3 8-10s in play.
I don't know if it's going to take that much time, because Neirea sits back and goes, what's good here?
I'm liking this Spellfire Potion. I mean, Alex Draza makes a lot of sense, too, with the damage he has in hand.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. He's just making sure there's no way he can die.
Admirable. I'm going for 3 8-10s every time.
Same.
He just wants to get the game over as quick as he possibly can. I understand. And that is going to be enough damage with Leroy Jenkins plus the Hellfire. And Neirea is going to tie up the series at 2-2. The weaknesses of Dragon Priest showing through for Dr. J.
Yep, it's any combo-oriented strategy or a strategy that can have strong inevitability and not present you with opportunities for value. It's a matchup Neirea very much understands, and Dr. J just everything got answered that he did in the early stage. He tried to be aggressive. It was stuffed.
And this is going to be a test for DrJikininki. Started the series 2-0. Now it's 2-2. How does he react after being up in the series and now tied, after losing 2 games in a row with a deck that can feel like, when you're on a losing streak, that it can't win a game? I've been in that situation before, and I know that players who play a lot of Dragon Priest at home know what I'm talking about. You could have Dragon Priest and you just keep losing, and you're like, wow, I can't believe that this deck is considered good because it can't lose. It is good, just sometimes it runs into bad matchups or it doesn't get the draw that it needs. It can beat itself. So we'll see. We'll see if Dr. J can pick up the pieces and gain a lead once again. But again, this is going to be a real test.
I think so, too. We saw him be very confident in these first couple of games. He's getting the win, and again, he's throwing up the game count. He's like, that's 2 down now. Answered back at this point, and I think the matchups are a big influence of that. You know, that's part of being ahead in Conquest, is that you'll oftentimes have your good matchups still left in there. At 2 apiece, this is the time he's got to remember, look, this series is far from over. Got to get 2 more in the bank. No reason to panic. I think his draws were not the greatest in these last couple of games. Didn't have the greatest spots. Keep playing his game. I think he's been doing it right so far. So,
yeah. And this is just match 3 of the 8 that we have planned today. So we have lots of great Hearthstone action coming up.
Greetings, my friends, and welcome to the Bahamas as the Hearthstone Winter Championship continues. Homeblood versus Lovely Chook.
Lovely Chook and Palmblad, they're both waiting backstage for their matchup that's happening next. Probably watching in on these players just because they are part of the group, so you know you got to make sure that they're watching everything, taking in the information. But getting back into it, it's time for game number 5 of DrJikininki versus Neirea. Who's going to pull ahead and go to match point? It comes down to Dragon Priest versus Jade Druid. Now, this matchup has been around for a while, but the way players approach it has changed over the course of the matchup's lifespan within the past few months.
It really has, and I was always a big proponent of the fact that Jade Druid was a favorite in this matchup. I think if Jade Druid is in the hands of a very strong player, they understand how to get the game won, and that's that. Build your Jades, draw a lot of cards. Your Jades are bigger than their stuff. It means your stuff wins. However, I've been seeing Dragon Priests get a little bit more aggressive, play much more for tempo, be willing to take more risks, make more sacrifices, and that's really the way you get the edge in this matchup. Your cards are very strong in the early game, and for Neirea's deck, it doesn't answer health-efficient minions that well. That's something Dr. J should look to take advantage of, is the fact that his minions are not answered that well, and as a result, he can get a lot of damage in because of it.
Yeah, a lot of times the strategy in this matchup is to sort of ignore the small Jades that the Jade Druid is making and get in face damage while you can. There are a few cards that make it a little bit tougher. Neirea does have Druid of the Claw, which has sort of been making its way into lists. It wasn't in lists, a month ago even, and that was where Dragon Priest started to get those higher win rates against Jade Druid. But now that it's sort of made a comeback, especially coming out as early as turn 2, 4 health minions are tough for Priest to deal with. And if you can get ahead on the board as the Jade Druid, boy, you're in for a pretty good time.
Now I am a little bit curious about this. Neirea chose to taunt it up. There's not really much risk to it, but it certainly opens up the question, could he have just simply charged it and taken up the Northshire Cleric straight away? He wants the extra 2 health here, but it does potentially give Dr. J an opportunity to maybe get a card later on or force some disruption. You can see Neirea's turn 3 being dead, I think, is a big factor to this. If Dr. J wants to draw a card from this Northshire Cleric, it's going to be set up for a kill next turn anyway. And he would have to have Power Word Shield to go with it. All the factors here point to the 4-6 being better, even though he could have killed the Northshire Cleric immediately. The extra health on that means he might live an extra turn at some point.
Yeah, you look at like the turn 3, what is Dragon Priest going to play on turn 3? He would have been punished by like Blackwind Corruptor, but that's about it. Dr. J is loading up the board saying, eventually I'll get through this sucker.
Whoa, and he attacks in.
Ooh.
I don't know about that, TJ. That is a really inefficient attack, and now he's actually sacrificed his other Northshire Cleric. Hero Power clears off the first one. Druid of the Claw hits the second one. That attack was a blunder, I think.
Without Northshire Clerics, Druid's going to beat you on card draw every time. Even with Draken and Operatives, even with Bran, they're going to beat you. They have Wrath for one. They have Azure Drakes. They have Nourishes. They have Gadget and Auctioneer, Wild Girls later on in the game. They will outvalue you the longer the game goes on. And those Northshire Clerics, they're donezo.
I don't think Dr. J would have had much liberty of really getting much out of them either. It's just the Druid of the Claw providing so much board presence that not really much Dr. J can do about that. Just caught in a bad spot. I mean, turn 2 Druid of the Claw. Druid of the Claw is a nightmare for Priest on turn 5, let alone turn 2.
Are you just curving out?
It's a good way to do it.
The only thing, though, is he willing to give up control of the board to start ramping up these Jades? Because there's a potential, without using Swipe, that his board can get cleared and Dr. J can have initiative. But now, Neirea's rolling into Azure Drake. Then he has double Jade Behemoth to follow it up, which is going to be 3/3 Jade plus 4/4 Jade.
Big thing to talk about here is the tech choices from Dr. J. We've seen Bookworm in his hand stranded in the prior 2 games. In this matchup, Bookworm can do some work. Taking out that 3/6 Behemoth right away often opens up your trades. A lot of times, Neirea's just going to rely on that 3/6 taunt to block the way for damage or to save his other minions. If Bookworm is a factor, that is huge for Dr. J. So he's got a couple turns to pick it up, and it looks like he's going to force a swipe here. I don't think Neirea can leave this brain alive.
No, he can. Oh, man. That is having a playoff curve here.
That's why Neirea kept that swipe, is for a turn like this one.
Yeah. He's got to do it. Especially going into the later turns. If you let them get off a Brand Draconid Operative, it can sometimes spell the end, especially since Neirea fought so hard to get that value advantage early on and that board advantage. He's still going to roll into Jade Behemoth, but now these Jade Behemoths are lining up against the board much differently. He's got a 5/4 lining up against a 3/6. They can take it out and isolate that 3/3 Jade, which isn't that powerful yet. At this stage in the game, it's actually probably above average, I'd say.
Yeah. Finally a dragon for Dr. J. If Neirea had left the brand up, he actually wouldn't have gotten punished nearly as hard. There was no activation readily available. And so now Dr. J getting some information and potentially some cards that are going to help him out a bit. Every Druid card feels like it's pretty good in Priest.
Except the Jades.
Yeah.
Everything but the Jades. Azure Drake has natural synergy with the deck. Swipe allows Priest to have a little bit of wider removal than they're used to having. One thing that Priest struggle with is sort of spot removal on like 4 health minions. Swipe can help that. Wrath can also help that. Allows them to, you know, build minions and clear the board, which is another thing that they struggle with. A lot of times they have to make trades instead of using spells. But here comes the Jade train from Neirea. He's got plenty of card draw to back it up. If he takes control of the board at any stage, Dr. J's in trouble.
Well, it's a good clear for Dr. J. But never utilized Shadow Word Pain, never utilized Bookworm in that spot. I think it's something to look out for as this game goes long. Those cards are going to grow very weak as this game continues. Neirea just continues to play at a blistering pace.
That's second Druid of the Claw drawn. Keep in mind, Neirea does have 1 copy of Ancient of War, 1 copy of Mulch, and 1 copy of Living Roots in his deck. So it is teched a little bit differently than you'll see a lot of other Jade Druids.
Big draw for Dr. J here.
Yeah. Another Draconid operative.
Not so big on the pickup side.
Now, Aya is just a pretty strong minion. You know, even at 1/1, it's still okay. But Throwbridge just lines up so nicely against this Azure Drake to be able to keep the Draconid operative healthy. You mentioned earlier, one thing that I really liked is your minions have very high health totals. They have health advantage over Druid minions a lot of the time.
Another good draw, but Neirea, he's got to fear Shadow or Death at this point. Those cards have been in Dr. J's hand for so long.
But look at his turn if he doesn't play Ancient of War. He plays a smaller minion that still probably gets run over and then plays nothing else.
That's why he's uncomfortable right now. This is some of the bit of emotion that we've seen from Neirea at times. When he's in a tough spot, that's when he starts thinking a little bit deeper. Is there any way I can get away with not playing this Ancient of War right now?
It's funny. One thing that stood out to me that of something that Neirea said.
Uh-oh.
He said that sometimes it's better to not think too hard and rely on your instincts than try and overthink things in a tournament setting.
And that's a good thing to do. I mean, that's one of the reasons these guys practice and they think about the game is so they don't have to be in spots where they're making tough decisions in crunch time. So it's important to be practicing and thinking about it and knowing what to do when you're in the moment. And sometimes when you get in unfamiliar spots, it's really tough to think because all that pressure's on. So obviously having a bit of a technical issue here, we'll get back into our games as quickly as we can. It's just we're at the mercy of technology at times.
Yeah, the game is still going on. Keep that in mind. Nothing has interrupted from the player's perspective. They're still playing the game. We'll get back to into it as soon as possible. You know what? We're just going to role play a little bit.
Right over the shoulder.
We're just going to zoom in right over their shoulder. Just really get into it. I felt like Neirea there.
That's a great shot. Love it.
Swipe drawn. Oh, and he picks that up right away.
It looked like it was necessary. That was a lot of power Dr. J had on board.
This is cool. I just want to cast Hearthstone like this all the time.
It's really easy to read the health totals.
And see the hand. But yeah, Dr. J, you can see him thinking pretty heavily here. Only 4 cards left for Neirea, so Dr. J can maybe feel like he's sort of winning this value game, but he still needs to keep the pressure up. And it looks like Neirea's at 14 health. If I can use my superhuman vision to read that number correctly. Now he's at 12. So that it is a lot of pressure. Dr. J has that power on the board. But if we remember back to when we could see the hand, he's got a few situational cards.
If he's drawing this way, he's under pressure. 2 Wraths certainly going to help him. So the game state did not change whatsoever. This was the same game that was happening earlier on. These players are picking it up. We will have to remain with this position for now as we resolve the tech issue. But suddenly, looks like Neirea's got the board.
Yeah, we're unable to reconnect to the spectator client, so we apologize, but we are going to stick with this perspective for the remainder of this game. sort of add a little bit of suspense to the action as Neirea starting to get very low in health. And Dr. J trying his best to keep up the pressure.
It's really interesting to watch the mouse movement, too. Dr. J constantly looking at the number of cards that Neirea has left. Fatigue is not an option for Dr. J in this matchup. Jade Idol will almost always provide a replenishing tool for Neirea to just shuffle 3 more into his deck and keep going.
Yeah, a lot of times what he is he's probably trying to look for how many cards are left so he can see what kind of outs Dr. J has and what's the percentage of those outs. So it is good to keep reminding yourself, how many cards does my opponent have left? He has 13 cards left. He has 1 Shadow Word Death left. So he's got a 1 in 12 chance to draw next turn that Shadow Word Death. Something along those lines. And a lot of times you'll see players do that.
Now, if he can force Neirea to use the other Jade Idol for board presence, that's another story. And he actually is going to use it there for board presence. So it seems to me like Neirea smells blood. This is his time to giddy up. Unless he'd already shuffled. If he's already shuffled, well, then I missed that part. Apologies.
Yeah, this is crunch time. Neirea's getting very low. He can pinpoint the range from Dr. J. That's another spike Historian picked up. You can see his hand right now. It's Shadow Word Pain, Twilight Whelp, and Dragonfire Potion. Bookworm, Alexstrasza, and Volcanic Drake are the options.
Not the strongest.
I mean, Alexstrasza is just an 8/8.
So are the Jades.
So are the Jades. Fair point. Fair point.
This is not okay for Dr. J right now. Dragonfire Potion is a card that has to be timed so well in this matchup. And if Neirea gets past the point where that card's super effective, it often just ends up being a dead card in Dr. J's hand. The fact that he couldn't find a spot to use that this game, certainly a big factor into him living those extra turns, maybe finding that little bit of extra damage. But the value for Neirea is so real right now. The roles have completely reversed from what it was in the mid stages.
Yeah, if he can take full control of the board next turn while also developing bigger Jades to play around the possible Dragonfire Potion, he's got the game locked up. And I like the choice from Dr. J. He really needs to ride that pressure in the next turn. He can't afford to take something that he's not going to even use on this turn, I don't think, or that is already redundant since he had Shadow Word Pain. And taking a look, there's the
Look how patient Neirea was with that Ancient Award too. Oh my god, I can't even believe that was still in his hand. I just assumed that had been played and died already in the moments that we had missed. And now the board is crushed. He's got everything in the world. There's just no counterplay here. Dr. J's got nothing left.
I think that locks it up. Dr. J, he's going to look at the Dragonfire Potion that's still sitting in his hand. He picks up an unactivated Blackwing Corruptor. And he's going to look at this board and say, there is no way that I get through this. That 7/7 lives, that 8/8 lives, and the Ancient Award lives. And that's just lethal damage on board. He's going to go through every possible scenario in his head. But I can imagine we're going to see a concede here. And in rare fashion, we actually get to see him press the button. And Neirea takes the win.
It's a crushing blow for Dr. J, but Neirea, now he's come back. He was at a 2-game deficit, and now he's at match point. 1 more game for Neirea, and the match is his.
You're watching Hearthstone history being made. A new way to watch competitive Hearthstone. Just a camera right over their shoulders. We should have the regular spectator client back for the next game. For those of you, we had a little bit of a technical error throughout that match. But it added to the excitement a little bit. It was pretty cool.
Just great shots.
Yeah, nicely done.
I mean, it's rare that you get to see, like, in the player's shoes, like, everything that's happening while they're out there. Just the big setup that's there. And, again, like, having to wear this headset, where you are on stage, all the lights that's happening. It's a very different experience. And until you've done it, you really have no idea what you're in for. And then as soon as you get there, you're like, oh, I didn't expect this.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. But Dr. J, the pressure is on now. Wow, real creative techniques. What should I name this one? Neirea. What should I name this one? Neirea.
I'm thinking Neirea for the third one.
Me too. But yeah, Dr. J now down in the series after starting it off 2-0. It feels like a very long time ago that we saw Dr. J after that second win throw up the 2. He had 2, he needed 2 more. Now he still needs 2 more, and Neirea's on match point.
Dragon Priest's been struggling.
It really has. I mean, there's quite a few players that ended up bringing Dragon Priest to this tournament. 63% of the field. 10 of the players out of the 16 brought Dragon Priest to this tournament. So it's obviously a popular choice. It can capitalize on some of the slower lists, like Reno Mage, like Jade Druid. But we can see Jade Druid, if they get to that point where they can just start building up those Jades. I mean, Neirea was at the point, his Jade was at 9-9. How do you deal with that as a priest? You only have 2 Shadow Word deaths.
He was at 7. Which is like totally safe against a priest.
Yeah.
All their cards are dedicated to taking the board, securing the board, and that's basically it. Outside of that, they don't deal a lot of damage directly from hand. It's a weakness of that deck. If you can stabilize at a low life total, that's totally fine.
7's the sweet spot.
Yeah, it's just outside the Brand Corruptor.
Brand Corruptor is about as good as it gets. And he saw Brand, so even 4 could have been a sweet spot.
Yeah.
But let's get into it. Game number 6. Neirea on match point with this Freeze Mage and Dragon Priest. Even though this is a pretty good matchup, there are some crazy things that can happen with that card right in the middle of Dr. J's hand. The Dragonid Operative.
That card is so important to the matchup because it's discovering cards from Neirea's deck. His entire deck is built around the facet of stalling pressure, drawing cards, setting Ice Block, which will make him immune to death for a turn, and then killing from hand with nothing but damage. In this matchup, Dragonid Operative can play a lot of different roles. It can let Dr. J see into Neirea's game plan. If he peeks at an Alexstrasza still in Neirea's deck, he knows he's a lot safer in a situation like that. It can grab him his own Ice Block to be immune to death for a turn. Completely disrupts Neirea's combos in a lot of spots. It can get him burn spells, extra access to burst that Neirea may not account for. The matchup boils down to whether or not Dr. J's pressure is going to be stifled from Neirea. If it's stifled, he will be in bad shape. If it's not, a lot of pressure is on Neirea to close the game.
One of the things that Dragon Priest often struggles with is damage from hand. And Dragonid Operative can offer that to you. And right off the bat, Dr. J has a pretty effective start. He's able to curve out, draw cards, and develop a 3-5 on turn 3. So the pressure will begin. And it's up to Neirea to try and stop it. Right off the bat, he does not have any card draw. No cycle in the hand. Freeze Mage is a deck that beats itself more often than you beat it.
This is certainly one of the situations where Neirea looks like he may have run into I don't want to say failure rate because he's not dead yet, but the start of a failure rate for Neirea. Now Bran is looking like it's sticking to the board for quite some time. He has no card draw, he's under pressure, and there's no way to fight for board at the moment. If Neirea wants to fight for board, he's just going to have to use an Ice Lance, and that means he's not going to win. So he just has to let this Bran hit and hope for the best. And I'll tell you what, TJ, the best does not usually come on Neirea's side in this instance.
No, not at all. Now, both Ice Blocks were in the hand from Neirea, so Dr. J cannot pick those up. And there you go, damage from hand is almost always going to be the choice. I can imagine Fireball is going to be picked up here as well. 9 additional burn damage picked up for Dr. J. That's what you need.
He would have won last game with 9 additional damage, that's for sure.
Imagine if Dragon Priest had access to mage burn spells all the time.
No.
Please. No, thank you.
I don't want to do that. That sounds terrifying.
That's your prerogative, Admirable. Don't be that's Admirable.
Well, Dr. J is about to be that's Gladmirable. He's wiping out this Emperor Thorson, and that's a weak Emperor Thorson from Dr. J's perspective. 5 cards discounted. Now, we can see that these are all key cards to discount to some degree. Ice Block being set at 2, more flexibility when you're trying to just squeeze out that little bit of damage. Frostbolt Ice Lance, need a couple of a combo, but there's no card draw. He's under a ton of pressure. Dr. J is just going to kill him pretty quick. This is a matter of how he wants to do it, basically. Defender of Argus providing an additional 4 points of stats on the front and back end of these minions this turn, thanks to Bran. And picking up 2 more dragons as well.
Another operative. Nefarian can give him another mage card.
This
2 more mage cards.
I can't even think of a sequence of draws that could win Neirea this game.
Runner, burn spells. Forgotten Torch to the face, into Arcane Intellect, into both Roaring Torches.
Would that even win?
Maybe. So let's go through it. That's actually relevant to talk about because we got to talk about how Neirea is going to win this matchup. With Evolve Kobold, Frostbolt, Ice Lance, that's only 4 mana, so he has 6 mana left to cast spells, assuming he has 10. So double Roaring Torch would be 16, plus the Frostbolt, 21.
Oh, you know, honestly, that could do it.
Plus the Ice Lance, which ends up being 27 points of damage.
Card draw is going to be the big factor on this next turn. I think if Neirea doesn't pick up card draw next, it's rough. But
he's got the start to it. He's got the Kobold plus a few burn spells reduced. So his next 4 draws are going to have to be card draw and or burn if he wants to end the game. And he might be able to do it. His ideal draws tell us that it's possible.
Let's throw 4 more damage. Who's the Freeze Mage now? He's got Frostbolt Ice Lance.
In the words of Super JJ, doof, doof, doof. Who's the aggressor now, Mr. Freeze Mage?
I wonder why he did all the doofs.
Who knows?
That, yeah.
Just a sound effect.
That's nerves right there. That's the uh-oh face. It's not in the cards, Tej. Sly glance up from Dr. Jade.
He's starting to stare down Neirea less and less as the match goes on.
Calm yourself down, too. I mean, he's dropped 3 straight.
Sure. And I think Neirea has potentially pinpointed a possible win scenario here with the Forgotten Torch to the face.
Well, in theory, he doesn't get the Ice Block pop this turn if Dr. J wants to kill the Doomsayer.
His next draw has to be Arcane Intellect into both Roaring Torches, and Dr. J has to not heal 2 turns in a row.
That's impossible.
That's the win condition. It's not impossible. Neirea realized that that's his only way to win. But Dr. J has got to be scared knowing that Neirea's got 4 cards in his hand. All have been reduced by Emperor Thorsan. And with a huge board like this, he Forgotten Torched my face. Alarm bells are going off in Dr. J's head.
It's a great time to Frostbolt.
And if that hero power doesn't come out from Dr. J, just punch me right in the face, Admirable.
You got it, TJ. So Dr. J's hoping that that secret acts as a bluff. Maybe Neirea thinks he's got Ice Block in play, but he's had his Ice Blocks the entire game. He knows it's not.
Yeah.
I can't think of it.
No. Heal comes out next turn, regardless if Neirea drew perfectly. He knows that it's not possible, and he concedes. That means, Admirable, we're going to a game number 7 between DrJikininki, the newcomer to the Hearthstone Championship Tour, going up against Neirea, who's been around the block a few times.
Indeed he has, but now there's only one more trip left if he's going to take this set home. It's this last game. All the work and all the preparation they've done for this match, for this tournament, this is a big blow to take in the first round if you lose, and it's a big step to take if you win. The Freeze Mage of Neirea versus the Reno Warlock of DrJikininki.
This is not a place that you'd want to be if you're Dr. J for it to come down to this matchup. This matchup is tough. But he's beaten the Freeze Mage twice now with 2 of his decks. Both of them aren't necessarily favored matchups for him. It was the Shaman to start things off, and then it was the Priest, the Dragon Priest. Both of those, you look at it and say, wow, Freeze Mage probably has a pretty good chance. And it's the same going into the Warlock game. But here we go, game number 7. Neirea looking to join the elite group of players to make it back to a world championship. He was there in 2015. He said he was pretty happy with how he performed, but he was not happy with where he finished. So he wants to make it back there again and maybe make it a little bit further, maybe take it all the way. Dr. J, he's just looking to prove himself on a big stage.
And this is the game to do it. This is indeed a tough matchup for him. Where Dr. J's deck is mostly about offsetting early pressure just a tad and then using some AoE spells, clear out the board, having Reno Jackson to be that ultra-powerful healing spell and restabilize the game. It's an important tool in this matchup, but Mountain Giant's much more important because pressure is something that's really lacking from Dr. J's side. He's got to get Neirea under pressure so that he doesn't have the freedom to just draw every card in his deck with Loot Hoarders, with Acolytes, with Arcane Intellects, because if he gives Neirea that much time, it's a free game for Neirea. He will find the damage. He will burst 30 from hand. However, when he's got to pay attention to threats, that's when his combo starts getting disrupted. That's when he has to use burn spells, which break up that from-hand damage. It's when he's got to pay attention to Dr. J and putting combos together. He's got to start figuring out how Dirty Rat works. All those things make a big difference, but this chip damage early on is a major advantage for Neirea as well.
A lot of people discount the fact that Loot Hoarders, they can get in some deeps. Loot Hoarders can do some real damage, and that can force Dr. J to maybe have to be defensive earlier than he'd like to. Maybe go for a play that's not as pressure-oriented as he may need in the matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit surprised by this Earthen Ring Farseer, but he does need to stop this damage to some degree. He can't just let it keep hitting, or he can die a lot sooner than he expects.
Yeah, now Dr. J, a lot of players don't feel that comfortable in game number 7s because they feel the pressure, but Dr. J, he loves Reno Lock, and we talked to him about it. Take a look.
My favorite of the decks I brought has to be Reno Lock. I like Reno Lock the most just because even if it is like a one-of deck and you may not draw the one-ofs, it's still one of those decks where you can be a bit creative with it.
Well, I mean, he's going to have to get real creative if he's going to want to beat this Freeze Mage that has had a blistering start, not only with pressure, but with card draw. Kazaka's Potion, he's got some decent choices, goes with 5 mana. He realizes that he sort of needs tempo at this point. He can't play that long game. He needs to start going now. And I believe it's armor plus draw cards, so he wants to get closer to Reno. He wasn't able to tap as much as he would have liked in the early game, and so he's going to make up for it with the 5 mana Kazaka's Potion.
Yeah, it's a big deal too, because the last thing he wants to be doing is just paying his extra life if he doesn't have to, as he falls to 23 this turn. But the armor is really the big facet. That's a wrench in the plans for Neirea a lot of times. Whenever he can't just burn him straight from hand, because if he starts the sequence, say he goes for a 2-turn setup, then 7 more life gets thrown in the mix, suddenly that could change things. So the armor is probably one of the better options you can get from the potion of Kazakus. And it's looking like he's going to need it.
That's so much draw.
It's a lot of damage,
Look
too.
at it. He draws Emperor Thorson. He's like an ice lance away from just winning the game.
That's a good one, too. So Neirea's going to use Frostbolt here to hedge his bets against this Doomsayer dying. If he doesn't Frostbolt this Mountain Giant, what ends up happening is Dr. J can clear it, and then Neirea's got another big problem in front of him. In this instance, if Dr. J actually takes care of this Doomsayer, Neirea's got Fireball for it. So that pressure has been completely stifled. Where does Dr. J find his win in this game? There's a lot left to fight through, and this is a big hunk of pretty poor cards. That's how he's got to win. He's got to take risks like that one.
Blast Crystal Potion will put him behind on mana for the remainder of this game, at least until he gets to 10. But keeping that Mountain Giant alive, Dr. J realizes is crucial to the win condition. But he's going to watch Neirea just draw card after card after card. And he's got to be feeling like it's only a matter of time before he sees Emperor Thorsan hit the board. And it's lights out.
His hand is fairly threat light. He does have some extra damage with Leroy, Soulfire, Abyssal Enforcer. He's got some hits coming, but the big one right now is that he's really forcing Neirea's hand. And you can see how frustrated Neirea is here. He really doesn't want to use this Fireball.
I'm thinking about it too. I don't want to use it either.
I wonder.
I'm thinking about it too. I don't want to use it either. I feel like he's gotta. If he leaves it there and just freezes it with the Frost Nova, and another threat hits. He's in a lot of trouble.
And you can see Dr. J rewarded for using the Blast Crystal Potion to keep that Mountain Giant alive. That's another Fireball that he doesn't have to worry about being launched at his face. And even though Neirea had the card draw early on, now it's getting to a point where it's awkward. And it's that moment from the match earlier where he played Acolyte of Pain, didn't count his cards well enough, and overdrew what was potentially his only win condition left in his deck. Is that weighing into his mind? Is that making him scared to draw more cards than he needs to at this situation?
Well, I certainly think the Acolytes are a little bit better early on than they are late, especially in a matchup like this one, but that could be part of the reason why he's using the Forgotten Torch here as well. He's really not concerned with the 2 extra damage, but he is concerned with his hand size, and he's also very concerned with being overdrawn at this point. I'm certain that game is flashing through his head right now. Don't get your key card burned. You know, do those results-oriented sort of things, do those affect players too often in situations, I wonder? I mean, some players, they shrug it off, they don't think anything of it. You take a big enough hit, and you think twice. It's important to stay logical. Look at Neirea right now.
Channeling his brain energy into his cards. Bet he wish he had X-Hope's hat right now.
I wonder.
I don't know, I didn't click to it. I was like, what is TJ talking about? And I remembered the clip. It was, oh, yeah.
Draw a card with Novice Engineer here. Is it worth it expending another Fireball?
Well, that's really what Neirea is going over right now. He's thinking about the game, you know, turns down the road. Like, what happens if I draw these cards? What happens if I draw these instead? You know, thinking about burn damage, thinking about stall effects. Now that he's drawing the Roaring Torch, it unlocks a little bit more card draw, and he's still able to wipe out the Abyssal if he wants to. But then he picks up Emperor, and he picks up Alexstrasza. When he finds those tools, this is an opportunity for him to get aggressive and look to start closing this game. That is a ton of damage in hand.
Next turn, he can set up the Ice Block and play Emperor Thorsan to reduce the cards in his hand and make sure that he's not going to die the following turn. He might need to wait a turn and go with, say, Emperor Thorsan plus Frost Nova if he realizes that he may need to set up a few turn lethal beyond that. But he's got the options that he needs. That's what Neirea's been looking for. That's why he's kind of looked a little bit frustrated with his draws, because he was drawing more card draw, but not much substance with his deck.
Well, now Dr. J is going to use his potion. Is he? Whoa, what? That Demon Wrath has to be make Neirea think this is something else card. I don't think there's. Wow, he is that concerned with taking a single point of damage right now. He wants to conserve every point of armor.
I mean, how many times, Admiral, have you watched a match like this, whether it be Freeze Mage versus Reno Lock or Freeze Mage versus just about anything, and they have exact lethal because of their planning? Every point of damage can matter. And how good is Demon Wrath going to be throughout the rest of this game? It's not going to be that great.
What does the 2 health on the Twilight Drake mean?
That's true. It's about balancing that. Sometimes we even see Reno Locks use their AoE spells to kill off their own minions later in the game to make room on their board for Reno or Earthring Farseer.
Dr. J did that in game earlier.
Yeah, he killed off his Manatite Totems to stop drawing and make room for Jinyu Water Speakers. So getting that AoE out of your hand now, maybe damaging your minions could be a good thing, especially if it's to block damage.
And there's not a really strong way to kill this Emperor Thorsan for Dr. J. This is going to be a use of multiple cards if he wants to handle Emperor. And I can tell you right now, he's got to handle Emperor. If he doesn't, he will die.
Once you get into the 2 Emperor Thorsan tick range, you're looking at potentially your opponent being able to Alexstrasza you and kill you in the same turn.
With over 30 points of damage.
Well, maybe that gets into the 3 Emperor tick range, but 2 is still very threatening. Now 4.
That's when you just win the game. Not like the game you're in, just you win Hearthstone at that point.
It's a quest. 4 Emperor ticks. Reward, win the game.
This is probably the best counterplay available. The minions aren't the strongest right now. Just needs to find a way to be able to burst Neirea in one turn, take care of what he's throwing at him. Is the Emperor of his own a threat to Neirea at this point. Now that Faceless Manipulator's gone, that's a lot less damage from hand that Dr. J has access to with Leroy Jenkins, Power Overwhelming, and Faceless Manipulator. Just gonna keep drawing.
I like it. Needs to find a little bit more burn before he can start going in. So this turn's going to be just secret development. Next turn's probably going to be the spook turn.
Well, I mean, you mentioned it earlier. How often do they have exact lethal? Neirea's, I mean, if I counted that right, that's 27 from hand right now.
Fireball 8, Roaring Torch 8, that's 16.
That's 27 damage. Dr. J has to heal himself for at least one this turn. If he does not, he loses.
Siphon Soul on the Acolyte pin would be the most reasonable to deny the draw. If he plays Reno this early, he's not popping the block, so he's vulnerable to Alexstrasza the following turn.
That's right. Alexstrasza often saved for that situation.
He's not going to play the Siphon Soul.
That's not a heal. That's not Reno. I'm pretty sure I counted that, and Neirea's going to check it and check it and check it, but I think that's lethal.
Yeah, he already mousing over the Evolved Kobold. Neirea is a very experienced Freeze Mage player. I'm sure he's been doing the math in his head, but this is a time where you
27.
triple check,
Wow.
quadruple check. The Demon Wrath and the Novice Engineer didn't even matter, and that means Neirea is going to come back from a 2-0 deficit and take the series versus DrJikininki.
Wow. Unreal. 27-0. Every single thing in that game mattered for Neirea. Heal on the final turn. It's tough to spot that. You're looking at the board going, oh, I got Siphon Soul for Alexstrasza. Can Reno Jackson back up to full in this position? Everything's stifled at that point. That's a tough one to call.
Yeah.
Siphon Soul would have saved him that turn, though.
Yeah, but taking a look at the bracket for this group. With the win, Neirea is going to go on to face the winner of Palmblad versus Lovely Chuk, which will be coming up next. DrJikininki will move down to lower bracket, but he's got that experience under his belt, so we'll see later if he can bring it back. But standing by on stage is Rachel with our winner, Neirea.
Thank you so much, guys. Neirea, congratulations. We were talking about how Dr. J is one of the newest players. You are one of the most OG players up here, and that's why it was a little surprising to see you make one of the mistakes you made today. What was going through your head there when you overdrew with that Acolyte?
I should have torched my Acolyte in the turn, but it was kind of counterintuitive play. You play Acolyte, you torch it right away. But yeah, I think I was thinking at the time, I threw the game. But I had a chance if the torch, the Roaring Torch, was not the last card. So I could have killed him in 2 turns. Like, there was a setup anyway. But yeah, I threw the game. And a game later with Rogue, I also misplayed because Rope was burning, and yeah.
You don't have to confess all your sins to me. I just wanted to check in with the Acolyte. But I wonder, is part of it because we've got this new desk behind us, and you guys are a little closer than you used to be to your opponents. Did you notice that he was staring you down throughout that match?
I didn't look at him. I looked into the game. I was focused on it. I think I played the game well, except this one turn only. So yeah.
You absolutely played well, and we talked about how long you've been in the game, and we have these new players coming up. What do you think of all the new talent coming into Hearthstone?
It's always great to see new players come on top, like Dr. Hippie last year. I think it's great for the game that the competition becomes harder and harder, and it's great to see me standing on the stage right now as well.
Heck yeah, it is.
Yeah, throughout like 2.5 years of being a professional player.
Well, it's always good to see you up here. You've done well. We'll see more from you. Let's give it back to TJ for now.
Cool to hear his thoughts on all that stuff. We pointed out the 2-turn lethal, but that's great self-awareness by Neirea, and you could tell competitive players that have been around for a while, the first thing they want to do when they come out of the match, and you could see Neirea do it, was talk about the things that happen.
And oftentimes they're mistakes in instances like that. That's one of the reasons these guys get so good, is because they're constantly evaluating their own play. No matter how good they played everything else, they're looking for ways to still improve further.
Yeah, but Neirea with that win, he's going to move on through to the next round through the upper bracket. He'll go on to face the winner of Lovely Chuk versus Palmblad. And there's Neirea. You can see, whoa, the stare down from Dr. J. I got a little bit scared there. Got goosebumps now. Got goosebumps. But Dr. J will fight it out through the lower round. But don't worry, guys. We have plenty more Hearthstone action coming up.